There was a car full of nuns speeding through downtown Three Rivers on M60. A cop pulls the car over and sees the sisters inside and says, "You're driving a bit fast, aren't you, sister?" Sister Margaret said, "I saw the sign and I drove the speed limit, officer, 60. "No," the cop answers. "That's the name of the highway, M60. Then he notices three horrified sisters in the back seat, stiff and white as ghosts. "What's with them? Are they sick?" he asks. "Oh, no," she said. "We just got off of Highway 131. Like the two roads the sisters traveled. Today I have two sermons. One about forgiving others and one about forgiving life. Now I can see by the looks of some of your faces, you're looking at the exits, they're going to be short sermons. So, the first sermon, forgive your enemies. It messes with their heads. Now on to the second sermon. Okay, maybe that's a little too short. Let me just expound a little bit more. We have all known people whose circumstances have hardened and jaded them into living a bitter, angry life. An old aunt, a brother-in-law, a friend, a co-worker. And it's like they carry this huge suitcase around with them everywhere. And it's stuffed with resentment and negativity and hate. Hate is very heavy. And we've all been there dealing with forgiveness. Sometimes it's big things, sometimes it's small things. And maybe for you, it was an offhanded, hurtful comment, or somebody you really trusted left you, or a friend turned on you. Which takes us to Peter's question, how often should I forgive? 7 times 70 is Jesus' answer. And we find something interesting in the details of this gospel story. The first servant owes 10,000 talents. A talent was not an amount of money, it was a weight. A talent weighed about 75 pounds, and it was usually of silver, like a king's ransom. What would it be worth today? I went to eBay and I found out that I could purchase an ounce of silver for about $200. So I did the math. $200 times 16 ounces per pound times 10,000 equals $32 million. 32 million. Only one theological word to describe that. Wow. Obviously, this servant had maxed out every credit card any of his family ever owned. So, in other words, it's an unpayable debt. But the king, in his great mercy, feels sorry for the servant and he forgives the debt. Now, the servant who had just been pardoned also had a servant who owed him 100 denarii, which is plural for denarius, and a denarius was a standard day's wage, like minimum wage, times 8, times 100. Today it would be worth roughly $7,200. Now when you compare these two amounts, it's staggering. $32 million as opposed to $7,200. You see, the force of the parable rests on the comparison. As followers of Jesus, we have received, as a result of Christ's costly generosity, the remission of a great debt, the debt of sin, a debt that we ourselves could never repay. How utterly inappropriate, then, is an unwillingness to forgive others who, on a vastly smaller scale, have offended us. We forgive because we are forgiven. And that doesn't mean that the person wasn't wrong. What it means is we give away that person's power to hurt us any longer. And we also give away the right to wring their neck like the servant did. In other words, we let go and we let God deal with the judgment and the revenge, which can free us. It can free us from lugging around one of these metaphorical suitcases the rest of our lives. Whew. Because forgiveness doesn't really change our past, but it does change our future. Which takes me to sermon number 2. See, that wasn't so bad. Lately, I've had a feeling of vulnerability and helplessness. Death, sickness, violence, injustice, funerals, storms, earthquakes. I've been through this before, sitting Shiva with the question, where is God in all of this? It is a theodicy. A theodicy is a theological term for reconciling the goodness of God with the badness that happens in this world. My first encounter with theodicy was when I was watching Walter Cronkite as a kid. I was the kid, not Walter Cronkite. And it was in the 60s. That was before news was so opinionated, before networks played their electric guitars with special graphics and light shows, and J.C. Penney models as journalists 24/7, and before sensational stories came with their own theme music. Walter simply reported the news. And as I watched, I saw scenes of the war in Vietnam. Helicopters and jungle forests and dirt roads and sweat-stained soldiers with bandanas on their foreheads and rifles on their backs. And one night, my family, we all sat on the couch as they showed this one particular village ravaged by the battle. And dead bodies were everywhere, including animals. And shocked, I blurted out, "You mean they kill dogs too?" And my big brother, who had come back from that war, minus a leg and half of his heart scared out of him, wrote a newspaper article with that same title, "You mean they kill dogs too?" And this last month, we have watched scenes of hurricanes and earthquakes and destructive paths, and we've experienced loss. We see the suffering. And I keep waiting for the usual Christian leader to come on TV, some pastor from Texas or Oklahoma that we've never heard of, who got his divinity degree from Zappos.com, saying that this is all God's judgment, like they did in the previous hurricanes and the previous earthquakes. It was either God or the devil, they say. Either way, I'm embarrassed by it. And we've all had our share of losses and tragedies and hurts in this parish as well. And when I sit with this pain in my lap of the flock that God has charged me with, I remember Jesus said I remember Jesus never said he would save us from getting hurt. Jesus got hurt. The apostles got hurt. Jesus' Mary Mother, the saints, the martyrs of the church, God got hurt. And I came to the conclusion, again, that we are not pawns on a chessboard. God is not like the pathetic Wizard of Oz, hiding behind a curtain, pushing buttons and pulling levers to run our lives. It's the old, everything happens for a reason theory. Don't believe that. My friend Chris was abused as a child. My friend Barry was abused by a church. He asked too many questions and they kicked him out. We have brothers and sisters right in this parish, in St. Mark's, who are grieving the loss of a loved one. And it may have been last week, it may have been last year, it may have been 20 years ago. Sickness and violence and abuse and death, could there ever be a reason for it? These in themselves, in every way, are the very opposite to the nature and character of God. When Jesus walked the earth, he showed us what God is all about, revealing God's heart. He loved children. He healed people of their diseases. He went out of his way to put his arms around those hurting and suffering and unclean. And when it came to death and to grief, Jesus wept. I remember Sister Margot, a Roman Catholic nun, who was 137 years old. She was about this tall, but she had a large spirit. And she led this grief support group that I was in after a car accident claimed the lives of my family about 20 years ago. I guess we all have our wars, don't we? And in this one meeting, I went off on them, writhing and spewing about the question of why. Why them? Why me? Why is this happening? And Sister Margot came over to me, and she put her wiry little arms around me, and she said, "Life's not out to get you, Rick. There is no reason. Accidents just happen." And to that point in my life, nothing else had made any sense. And when she said that, it was like I dropped a heavy suitcase. And I began to learn to forgive life. And I stopped blaming God. And to those of us who have lost, if we can let go of that anger and that fear, like suitcases, we'll make it through. And we'll know who we are on the other side. Maybe God doesn't plan every detail of my life. Maybe there isn't a reason for everything. Maybe life just happens. But God is there to bring good, even out of the worst of our tragedies, of which I am, and many of you are, living proof. Amen.